Female Teacher in Special Classroom. Author, Agam Mora. Crossdress Small World, Part 9, Whitewash. In the principal's office. A middle-aged man opens the door and enters. In the room right now, the principal alone is sitting sadly. The event of Mr. Deva's dismissal has caused a lot of fluctuations in recent times. The 10D class is gradually tending back to the days before, that is, a disorganized class. The 10D students were discontented and blamed everyone in the school for being the indirect cause of this. The heaviest time was 2 days ago. A student in grade 11 was talking about Mr. Deva's improper behavior, and as a result, a brawl between that student and the 10D students broke out. Of course, until now, that student is in bed at the hospital. Perhaps because the 10D class has become more obedient recently, many people have forgotten that they were the terror of the whole high school. In this regard, the principal also does not know how to solve satisfactorily. Because basically, the wrong man is him. Unlike students who only know Mr. Deva through malicious rumors released by Hillel, principal and teachers are the people who know more than anyone about Mr. Deva. Although there are still many teachers who do not feel adapted to the fact that Mr. Deva dresses like a girl, they all agree that Mr. Deva is a really good teacher and is good in all aspects. If they put them in Mr. Deva's position, would anyone volunteer for their students to accept being a girl? Surely this is not a pleasant thing. Most teachers here are married, so they know how hard it is to dress like a girl. Not to mention, what Mr. Deva does is completely contrary to society's judgment. Although people now have a much more open view, it doesn't mean that everyone accepts it. So, putting such a great teacher out of school, would the principal feel easeful? No, of course not. He feels ashamed to do it. He could not give Mr. Deva fairness. Even now, he has no way of stamping out the bad rumors that are gradually eroding Mr. Deva's honor. But what else could he do? The man who pressured him was the master of the Lynch family, a big businessman of the city, who almost disrupted the fashion market of the whole city. The more he thought, the more he was saddened. So when he saw the person who had just entered the room, his face was not very pleasant. That person is Anson Lynch, the master of Lynch family, also the direct cause of the principal's forced dismissal of Mr. Deva. Walking behind him was Hillel Lynch, a top student who had once won many major titles for high school. But it's just a thing of the past. Given the recent progress of the 10D students, if Hillel is one of them, his score is only in the middle of the class. From a guy who was the focus, gaining all his admirers' eyes from others, he suddenly became a commoner. This is why he made such a dirty move. Mr. Anson applauded, grinning as if mocking the principal's sad attitude. Well done, principal. The principal looked up at him and said, I know my identity, I can only listen to you. But I want to ask, is it worth it? Mr. Deva has never done anything to offend your family. He's just trying for his students. Mr. Anson laughed and said, how about that? As long as my son, the future master of the Lynch family wants, all his demands will be granted. No one is allowed to get in the way of any member of the Lynch family. Let my son restore the order he used to have. What about getting rid of a little teacher? Between a poor teacher and a big man in the future, of course you should know who is more important. Hillel also enjoyed a smile when he saw his father defending him. The principal only shook his head after listening to Mr. Anson's words. Although the behavior of Lynch family's master was absurd to the extreme, he had no way to counteract it. But suddenly there was a voice coming from behind, big man in the future? Good, very good. The disgruntled Mr. Anson turned his head. Who? But after seeing the human shadow appear in front of the door, he suddenly fell silent. The principal nodded and said, Good morning, Mr. Nash. Welcome to X High School." Mr. Anson presented an unpleasant face. He hasn't received any acclaim from the principal since he entered the school. But even if he was dissatisfied, he wouldn't speak up. Because in front of him was one of the most senior leaders of this city, Nash Larson. No matter how strong the Lynch family is, in the eyes of the Larson family, it is just a grain of sand in the desert. But why is he here? Mr. Anson's brain contained a series of questions. Hillel stood behind Mr. Anson, said, "Who are you to speak up here? Do you know who my father is?" Immediately, he received a slap from Mr. Anson. He was mad. "Shut up." Hillel said, "Why did you hit me?" But before receiving an answer from Mr. Anson, Mr. Nash's words echoed in his ears, "I just want to ask you. Since when do you have the right to decide the work of X High School? Do you want to take my place too?" Mr. Anson was afraid to blush. "No. No, sir. I dare not." In addition to being this city's senior leader, Mr. Nash is also behind X High School. In other words, this school was established by him. This isn't something too secretive. At this moment, Hillel was afraid to stammer, "Mr. Nash." Mr. Nash turned to the principal, "Why didn't you report to me before doing this? If it weren't for my son accidentally speaking, I wouldn't even know about Mr. Deva, my school's #1 talent, being forced to quit." Speaking of the second sentence, Mr. Nash gave a glance at Mr. Anson. Yes, Mr. Nash is the father of Dante Larson, the best student in 10D class. Dante was not going to ask his father to intervene because he knew he was just occupying a less important position in his father's eyes. But Dante's attitude could not to escape Mr. Nash's notice. Just to find out, he knew the source of the incident. Immediately, he asked Dante for details and then rushed straight here. If it had been in the past, Mr. Nash would certainly not have been too interested in Dante's affairs. But what happened recently made him think again. He didn't expect a man to change the difficult side of the 10D class. He had invited so many teachers to be homeroom teacher of that class, but all in vain. So, when he learned that Mr. Deva helped 10D class become obedient and win the highest achievement of the school, he extremely enjoyed Mr. Deva. Dante used to be an apathetic guy, not eager for life, suddenly turned into a cheerful person. Knowing the cause of that lies in Mr. Deva, he showed even more admiration for Mr. Deva, especially in the fact that he accepted to dress like a girl to achieve his purpose. This made him think again, did he treat Dante unfairly in the past? He decided to make atonement. The principal said, "Yes, I know my fault. I don't deserve your expectations." The reason the principal did not report back to Mr. Nash was because he felt Dandy's position was too low compared to that of Hillel. If he had reported it, he's afraid Mr. Nash would not have noticed. But he didn't expect Mr. Nash to be so interested in this. Mr. Nash said, "All right. This isn't entirely your fault. On the contrary, I want to see which big-hearted person doesn't want to live in this city anymore." Mr. Anson was afraid to speak. "Sir. You can't bring down Lynch family's inheritance because of this." Mr. Nash has not answered yet. Someone is rushing to see Mr. Anson. "It's bad, boss." Being pressured by Mr. Nash, Mr. Anson was already very angry, so when his assistant conveniently burst into the room, he shouted, "What is it?" His assistant swallowed a sip of saliva. The competitors' fashion stores are selling like hotcakes. Their sales are in balance with our fashion stores. Even if they follow this momentum, they will soon surpass Lynch family. Mr. Anson shouted, "How can the bastard colt do that? He's just a businessman dealing in all kinds of women's outfits. The property can't be as majestic as our own." His assistant explained, "Recently, they received support from the Black Pearl Gang. Although the Black Pearl gang has disintegrated, Dax has a lot of relationships with businessmen. But the main factor that caused them to grow unexpectedly was the entry of a new member, apparently named Dava. Hearing this, Mr. Nash suddenly laughed. "Looks like I don't need to interfere. Your Lynch family will have to pack up and leave this city on your own." Mr. Anson slapped Hillel again. "It's your fault. Lynch family is on the verge of bankruptcy because of you." To be continued. Today's story would like to stop here. Thank you for watching. Please like and share for people with similar interests to motivate me to develop my channel. Goodbye and see you in another story.